Thank you very much. And this is the first Friday. I've been a Member of Parliament now for 13 years, but this is the first Friday I'm here in the House of Commons, because we always go back to our constituencies to have surgeries. But I wanted to come and support my friend Andrew Rosendale, who is my best friend in Parliament, and also Radosław Fogiel from Poland, and the Polish delegation in particular. Bardzo jesteście miło widziane tutaj. Witamy Was tutaj do Izby Gmin. I'm the first ever Polish-born British Member of Parliament, so I feel very passionately about Anglo-Polish relations. And Andrew spoke about experience and the importance of older people sharing their experiences with younger people, so that they can learn not just from our mistakes, but learn from what's actually happened to us politically during the course of our lifetimes. And this is what I hope to explain to you during my speech. We joined the European Economic Community on the day I was born, the 24th of January 1972. So for 46 years we've been a part of this organisation, which was then the EEC, the European Economic Community. Then it went to the EC, then the European Community, now the EU. So our country has 46 of experience of how this organisation has systematically and very methodically and very specifically been moving in a certain direction to try to take away more and more power and sovereignty from each nation state, becoming a supranational structure. But before I start my speech, I want to tell you that there are two films at the moment, and if you have time, there are two wonderful films that you can see in Leicester Square. One of them is called Hurricane, and the other one is called the 303 Squadron. And these two films have been put out recently to highlight the unique contribution of Polish pilots during the Battle of Britain. And in the summer of 1940, the Luftwaffe and the Royal Air Force was so evenly balanced here in London that the Poles, coming in the huge numbers that they did, tipped the balance for the British side. And when Andrew and I think you were at the RAF Club with me, when Andrew and I were at the RAF Club recently, Lord Tebbit said at an Anglo-Polish dinner, it's very easy to replace the planes, very difficult to replace the pilots. And the Polish 303 Squadron shot down more enemy aircraft during the Battle of Britain than any other squadron. So we are celebrating the unique contribution of Polish pilots to helping us maintain our freedom during the Second World War. And we recognise their unique contribution, and we're very, very happy to have the Polish delegation here with us in the House of Commons. Goodness only knows what would have happened if you hadn't come and saved us when you did. Now, I want to tell you that the Poles came to see us in 2003 in this very building. Mr. Kawczynski came to see the then leader of the Conservative Party, Ian Duncan Smith, and he turned round to him, and I wasn't a Member of Parliament at that time, but I was invited anyway to listen to the meeting, and he said to Ian Duncan Smith, we want you to pull out of the EPP-ED group. We want you, as one of the biggest and most successful Conservative parties in Western Europe, to form a new bloc within the European Parliament. And we are going to work with you to take on the Franco-German axis, which has been pushing a federalist agenda since the inception of the European community. We worked with them. We went to Poland. We worked with the Czechs. And then we went, just around the corner here, to George Street, where Mr. Topolánek, the Czech Prime Minister, signed the declaration with David Cameron that we were all pulling out, the Poles, the Czechs, the Brits, the Hungarians, we were pulling out of the EPP-ED group, and we were going to work together to change the direction of travel of this organisation. How naive we were. We thought we could change things. But that started in 2003, and we failed spectacularly. We just simply couldn't change the direction of travel. And when Mr. Cameron came back to this country, Andrew and I sat down and discussed this, but he went out to the European Union, and for 2 years, I think he must have racked up enough air miles to buy himself another yacht, because he spent 2 years going around every single capital trying to explain to them some of the problems that we had as a member of the European Union. And these weren't artificial, politically motivated or inspired problems. These were real issues that our constituents were bringing to us every day, and that they were wanting and expecting and demanding that we tried to tackle them. After 2 years of negotiations, he came back with a fig leaf, a meaningless piece of paper, which Andrew and I felt it was impossible to sell to our electorate. Now remember, a Member of Parliament is always very keenly thinking of the relationship that he or she has with the electorate. And you have to look into their eyes every 4 or 5 years and try to get re-elected. If you try to sell them, you know, a pup, as we say here in England, if we try to sell them something rotten and they see through you, then of course your credibility can be dented and shattered. So we decided to campaign for Brexit. I was not a staunch Brexiteer. I wasn't one of these headbangers who has constantly complained about the European Union. I would say that my attitude to the European Union was one of ambivalence. But when Cameron came back, and by the way, we're not a small country. I don't want to insult any small country here. Small countries are just as important as big countries. But when you are a permanent member of the UN Security Council, the 5th largest economy in the world, a country that has put in £300 billion net into the European Union since we joined, and a major military power, you do expect and hope for people to try to listen to you and respect your concerns and to try to work with you to alleviate those. So when he came back with this, we campaigned for Brexit, and my constituency and Andrew's both voted Brexit overwhelmingly. And I think the whole process showed me just how unsustainable the whole European Union is. The idea that you have to get an agreement with 27 different countries, all with different perceptions, is absolutely impractical. And in the news today, we have Spain threatening to block our Brexit because of Gibraltar. Just one tiny issue. Now, I hope that will be resolved. I know that Andrew would not tolerate any compromise over Gibraltar, neither would I, which is a sovereign part of the United Kingdom, and we treat it in the same way as we do our own constituencies. So what I'd like to say to you is that they are rapidly moving, and this is what I want to share with you. This is what we've experienced. They are rapidly moving towards a single supranational structure, with a single parliament, a single flag, a single president, a single European army, and a single currency. Now let me just dissect a couple of those. The single parliament. Well, a single parliament far away. Great for the people of Flanders, well actually no, because I suspect you're against it as well. But from a geographical perspective, wonderful. It's right on your doorstep. You can go and see what's going on. Not so easy for my constituents in Shropshire to get to Brussels. And in fact, at public meetings, I put £100 on the table. At public meetings now, so I'll give you, anybody here, £100 if you can name me any of the members of the European Parliament that represent you. Haven't lost a penny in 14 years. Why? Because none of them know who they are. These people who are taking massive decisions on behalf of my constituents are completely unknown. And why are they unknown? Because they represent an area called the West Midlands. 6 million people. None of them live in the county that I represent. None of them live in Shropshire. None of them have offices there. None of them have homes there. None of them ever come there. And by the way, they work in another country. Now, how is that making them accountable to the people that they represent? Andrew and I go back to our constituencies every week. This is the first Friday, as I said to you, in 12 years I'm not in my constituency. Now, they all know who I am. admittedly, because I'm 6'9", a giant, they recognise me. But they don't just come to my office, they stop me in the supermarket. Mr. Kawczynski, I don't like the way you're doing this. Or they stop me in the swing with my daughter. Mr. Kawczynski, I want you to do that. But they can get at you. They can lobby you. They can complain. They can make your life difficult. And they can throw you out if they don't like you. That's true democracy. That's genuine accountability. And Andrew and I are passionate about the fact how our electorate hold us to account. That is what real democracy is all about. So the single parliament, now the single flag. Do you know who I get the most abuse from on Twitter? I just now mute them because I just can't tolerate all the confrontation and the aggression and the rudeness on Twitter. But guess who abuses me the most on Twitter?
Labour's?
No, people who have the European Union flag. They have the European Union flag on their Twitter accounts. That is mind-blowing for me. That is absolutely mind-blowing. The fact that somebody can associate with the European Union flag rather than our own British flag, for me, some of you may disagree, but for me that's highly destabilising and highly worrying, and I genuinely am worried about their loyalties and what motivates them and drives them. Single president. Mr. Juncker has said that he wants his legacy to be a single president of the Commission. And now they're talking about a single European army. Well, let me say this to you. When we pull out of the European Union in March, there will be 6 countries that are inextricably linked to the common defence of our continent, that are not members of the European Union and will not be members of the European Union. America, Canada, Iceland, Norway, Turkey, and the United Kingdom. Now think to yourselves for a moment where those countries are and what they are. 2 permanent members of the UN Security Council, 1 a major military superpower, who's going to keep the Atlantic open in the terrible scenario of a war between Russia and America? Well, the Canadians and the Iceland will help in that. Look at Norway, bordering Russia in the northern Arctic. Look at Turkey, protecting our southern flank from Iraq and Syria. And the United Kingdom. Hugely, hugely important countries. And the European Union wants to create a single European army, which at best will duplicate NATO, and at worst will usurp NATO, destabilise NATO, and long-term push NATO into obscurity with the European Union army taking over control. Now, if the EU had a history of success, that scenario would not fill me with as much dread as it currently does. Look at the crisis in the Mediterranean with their inability to deal with the migrants coming from Libya. Look at the catastrophic disaster of the Eurozone crisis in Greece. Look at the youth unemployment problems of Spain. Look at all the crises that they have so badly handled. And yet, look at even the crisis in Ukraine, which some people in this country blame the European Union for helping to precipitate and contributing to the crisis with Russia. The idea, and there are people in Brussels, I have heard them say this, and Andrew will be appalled at this, I've heard them say this, we can't rely on the British and the Americans anymore. We need to protect ourselves with a single European army. Yesterday I went to Lancashire to speak in Jack's constituency, my researcher, and I asked Jack on the way there, give me the statistics for how many losses we had during the First World War. 730,000 British soldiers killed in the First World War, and we went into the First World War because of our treaty obligations with Belgium. Then I asked him, what were our casualties in the Second World War? 432,000 killed because of our treaty obligations to Poland. In my county of Shropshire, there isn't a single village that didn't lose men during the First World War. We are the biggest landlocked county in England. there isn't a single village where we didn't lose men in our county. And they are telling us that they can't rely on us and the Americans anymore. And Macron even saying that they need to protect themselves from America. These are dangerous people. And if they are allowed to get away with what they're doing, they will have dangerous consequences for you. I know that Mr. Trump may not be to everyone's particular taste, but he is a transient figure. And when Andrew and I go to the American Senate and the Congress, as I'm sure many of you have done, you will realize just how committed the Americans are to working with us and protecting Europe. Because the Americans realize that they will never have freedom unless Europe is free. And we in Britain have realized after the Iron Curtain and the Cold War and what happened to Central and Eastern Europe that we can't really be free unless the whole of Europe is free. And then lastly, I just want to say about the currency. Now, some of you will be using the euro, but some of you have still not joined. There are 19 countries that are in the Eurozone. And when we pull out, there will be one country with a permanent opt-out, Denmark. So they're going to now try to bludgeon, what is it? Poland, Sweden, Czech Republic, Hungary, Romania, Croatia, and I've left one out, I can't remember which one it is, but, sorry? Bulgaria. Despite the fact that 71% of Czechs don't want the euro, despite the fact that 72% of Swedes don't want the euro, despite the fact that 58% of Poles don't want the euro, you have no choice. You will be forced to ditch your currencies and join the euro. Well, I have to tell you, I will go back to my beloved Warsaw, even if I have to raise the money myself. But we will take, if Schetyna gets in, God forbid, we will take any Polish government. I'm already trying to talk to barristers about this, but we will try to take them to court to see if it is at all possible to force them to give the Polish people a referendum on this issue before they abandon the zloty. That is absolutely imperative. Helmut Kohl, the late former Chancellor of Germany, stated categorically when he was interviewed here in London in 2013, we knew we couldn't possibly win a plebiscite in Germany on abandoning the Deutschmark, so we just implemented it anyway without giving the people a say. Every time these decisions have been made, they've been made without the consultations of the people. And every time the people have had the temerity to vote against the European Union, be they in Denmark, France or Ireland, they've been told to think again. They've made a mistake. They've got to vote again. Well, they've picked a fight with the wrong people this time. We are pulling out of the European Union on the 29th of March, and we are going to show you, we are going to become a petri dish. You will be watching us very carefully. But I promise you this, we will show you that a sovereign nation state can thrive outside of the European Union and take advantage of the huge opportunities that exist across the world. 95% of the world's growth in your lifetime is going to be outside of the European Union. And we have a huge opportunity, an exciting opportunity to build very exciting trading partnerships with many of these rapidly emerging economies around the world. So that's all I really wanted to say to you to begin with. I'm sorry if it sounds so really hardcore Eurosceptic, but I've been driven to it by our experiences of this unaccountable and undemocratic organization. And I hope, for your sake, that you will follow us, that you will see what happens to us, and that you will follow us out of the European Union. We give in international aid more than the whole of France and Italy combined. £14 billion a year. And some of us believe that's very important because as a Christian nation we have a responsibility and a duty to help the poorest in our society. But when we pull out, eventually when we're allowed to do our own free trade deals, because at the moment they're even trying to restrict that. But when we are finally in a position to do our own free trade deals, do you know what we're going to be doing with these poor third world countries? we're going to be giving them the greatest possible access to our markets, tariff-free. That is the way to help these countries, not through the protectionist racket that is the European Union, designed to protect inefficient industries in Europe at the expense of those third world countries. I'll give you one example, coffee. No tariffs for coffee because we don't grow coffee. Massive tariffs for roasted coffee because it's designed to protect the inefficient coffee roasting industries of Germany and Italy. I would rather buy my roasted coffee directly from the Kenyans, allowing them to have that value-add processing, allowing them to build up strength and a resilient economy themselves, rather than relying on handouts from British taxpayers. So there's much to play for. We will hold our Polish brothers' hands and do everything we can to help them. I know that most Poles want to remain in the European Union, and whenever I go on Polish television and I talk about this, people look at me in disbelief. But there is already a Eurosceptic caucus in the Polish Parliament, a cross-party Eurosceptic caucus. Tiny, but it's already growing. You know why? Because the Poles are already starting to see massive interference in their domestic affairs. Very sensitive issues for the Poles, because unlike some of you, we had no freedom. From 1945 to 1989, we were a satellite state of the Soviet Union. And I went back to Poland for the first time after martial law in March of '83. So I know what communism was like in Poland in those dark days. So we will work with the Poles and others to ensure that you too, one day, hopefully, have the freedom that we have campaigned for. Thank you very much.